All right, thank you, Vitaly. Thank you, everyone. I am super happy to be here to talk about leveraging AI to build more accessible products. And anyone who was at the workshop yesterday for accessible components, I love emojis, so I tried to put like as many as possible in here on this particular slide. All right, great. So my name is Carie Fischer, and I do work at GitHub, but I also am really interested in the academic side of accessibility and working on a PhD in human-computer interaction and really doing a lot of like deep dives. So I'm kind of both industry and academia because I really feel strongly about that data and making sure that we have something to support these assumptions that we're making about AI in particular. So again, yesterday I was in a workshop. I learned a lot of fun facts about the group that was in, including sloths can hold their breath underwater for more than 40 minutes. Who knew? The state of Kentucky is the world's #1 producer of mirror disco balls, and I think about 100 are in this room. So Kentucky got the paycheck. And then this gentleman in the front row, if he wants to wave, he is a downhill mountain unicycling champion of the world, right? Who knew? Unicycles. Yes. So come up and meet with me in between talks and say hi or buy me a beer and we can talk unicycles and sloths and disco balls. All right, so AI. AI is, swiftly evolved for, specialized technology. It used to be very niche. Very few of us were actually working with it. And now it's like everywhere, everything. Just like Vitaly said, it's in overlays, it's in, Brad showed us how to make code with it. You could even put an image and make code from an image. It's pretty fascinating. And of course, like when I first used it, I was doing things like editing blog posts, finding new jokes to tell, bad jokes for my kids. But as that AI technology has evolved, so have all those opportunities. So AI is now a major force in creativity, efficiency, and it changes really every way everyone is seemingly working, right? But it really, until earlier this year when I was doing talks at accessibility conferences about my company's product, which was GitHub Copilot Chat, and like how it's accessible and how it was made to be accessible, I hadn't really thought about it too deeply with what was it outputting, right? I was more concerned about making the product usable for people like with keyboard users, screen reader users, and that sort of thing. So I kind of started thinking about that. Of course, my academic mind kind of went into overdrive, and I thought, okay, are we creating more barriers now with AI, or we are breaking down barriers? And really, the answer is it depends on who you ask. So the accessibility community is pretty divided, right? And as we probably all are here too, some think that AI is going to solve everything. I press a button, everything's magically accessible, and there we go. Like, I would love that to be true, but it's not yet, right? Others, of course, worry that AI is going to overcomplicate code and really overlooking those challenges, especially by the people, right? The people with lived experiences, reducing that focus on personalized, human-centered solutions. But to me, I just think of AI as a tool. It's not inherently good or bad, it's just how we use it. For instance, you wouldn't use a hammer to twist in a screw. I mean, you could try, but it's probably not going to work very well. It's just the wrong tool for the job. So AI can sometimes be the wrong tool, and it inadvertently add accessibility issues into your product or your code base. But when you use it for the right tasks, it has really incredible potential to do amazing things. So before we dive too far in there, I would be not an accessibility professional if I don't talk about why do we even need to write accessible code? Why does it even matter? And as Brad was just talking earlier, and everyone here probably will be talking about our user, but we have over 1 billion people, which is 15% of the world's population, that identify as having disability. And that doesn't even count the people who don't check that box who may benefit from accessible products. So things like applying for a credit card, using online coupons for groceries, ordering a pizza through an app, or even voting. Those are all examples of real life places where technology and accessible technology has changed lives, even in the past 5 years or so. So it's hard to imagine like not being able to do those things that we take for granted every day. So definitely that's one of my motivating factors, but it's not all the motivating factors, unfortunately. We also have that legal compliance issue. We have that over 8,000 cases in 2023 alone, a 300% increase in lawsuits. As Vitaly mentioned, the EAA, which is going to go into law next summer, should be interesting to see how it is impacting all the EU countries. So it's an act right now, but it's going to turn into a law in June. But what are the repercussions, right? We don't really know how that's going to shake out, but it should be really interesting to watch. And definitely, you know that the lawyers in the US are going to be paying attention, for sure. So business case is kind of the other one. So we talked a lot about motivating factors in the workshop the other day. And to me, this is the one that is kind of untapped, right? We don't really talk about this a lot. But this is a smart business move. Accessible code typically is SEO compliance. It's typically, if you think about what SEO is, like search engine optimization, you think of it as a bot, right? A bot doesn't have eyes, a bot doesn't have ears, a bot doesn't have fingers, right? So it is the ultimate and accessible thing. So if it can scan your site, your digital product, then it's more likely that humans can as well. This is a 1.2 trillion spending power group as well, so it's very often overlooked. All right, so I wanted to show you, that's enough of me talking so far, I've done a lot in the last day, but this is a video of my colleague Florian. And I should have mentioned too that I work at GitHub, but I'm not representing them here too. So then that way I can tell you some bad things that I found when I was doing my demos. So this is not an example of a bad one, but what this is Florian is an expert in accessibility, and he's also happens to be a blind developer. So he is using his screen reader to navigate that Copilot chat that I was just talking about. I believe he's using the same that I am as an IDE in VS Code, so that's kind of the integration here. So he's using NVDA on a Windows machine, and on the right you can see the speech viewer. So as we play it, you'll hear his screen reader, and you'll also hear like the things that he has to go through, like auditory processing and like making a choice from this too. So I just thought it was kind of cool to play it, so hopefully the audio will come through. Let's see.
To start with, I'm going to type up a line of code, just to give us something to work with here.
Day 1, day 2, const time equals math.add. Day 2, day 1, const days equals math.sale. Div time slash 1000 star 60 star 60 star 24. Return div days, inspected in the accessible new, alt plus F2.
This audio cue that we're hearing, the little boop, means that GitHub Copilot has a suggestion ready to review. If we don't want to see it in detail, we can use the tab key to simply accept the suggestion. If we do want more detail, we can use alt F2, the accessibility view hotkey, to look at it in more detail.
Accessible view, explore actions such as disabling distance, shift plus tab, editor multi-line function, calculate days between 2 dates, day 1, day 2, const div time equals math.add, day 2, day 1, const div days equals math.sale, div time slash 1000 star 60 star 24, return div days, when, exit this dialog, escape.
As you can see, we can look at the suggestion in detail, and by pressing shift tab, we'll go to the toolbar, which lets us accept this code.
Accessible view toolbar, accept inline completion, control plus slash button.
This also tells us that we can use the hotkey control plus slash to accept this code suggestion.
Main landmark, S123.js editor and autocomplete multi-line.
There is no feedback for this, but the code suggestion has now been inserted. If we're not happy with this suggestion, we can use the hotkey Control-Enter to generate several suggestions for the given code. The suggestions are navigable by heading, and each suggestion has a button to paste it right into the editor.
GitHub Copilot suggestions for test123.js. Visual Studio Code document. Loading suggestions. Loading suggestions. Loading suggestions. Loading suggestions. 9 suggestions. GitHub Copilot suggestions for test123.js. Visual Studio Code document.
To navigate these suggestions, we'll drop into browse mode so we can navigate by heading.
Application. Clickable frame GitHub Copilot suggestions for test123.js. Frame suggestion 1 heading level 3. Function calculate days between 2 dates. Start date, end date. Const 1 day equals 24 star 60 star 60 star return math.round. Math.apps. Start date, end date, /1 day. Clickable button. Button clickable accept suggestion 1.
If I like the suggestion, I can select the accept suggestion button.
Button application main landmark.
It has now been placed into our editor.
All right. Believe it or not, that was slowed down significantly. I wanted to play that so people who maybe have never heard a screen reader in action, right, like not only like visually, you know, he was doing pretty simple things, but auditorily there was a lot of choices, suggestion, 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 right? And so it kind of, it's definitely important to make our products accessible, but you know, even when it is mostly accessible, you still have a lot of things to overcome. So anyway, back to, well, we'll get on to AI, but I just wanted, if you want to watch Florian's video or see any of the other ones, you can go to bit.ly/AI screen reader, or you can scan this code, and there's a whole, a plethora of different kinds of videos around that. So just to kind of see how it works. Because again, that's what I've been working on the past year with our group. But as the expectations for inclusive digital experiences grow, AI is stepping up a major role to make that happen. So AI tools have become great allies for developers, and they really do help us fix accessibility issues faster and more efficiently. So not only fix them, but find them. So these are kind of like, these are the good things, right? We'll definitely talk about some of the limitations, but quick detection, that is kind of the #1 thing here. It's super fast. Like rather than spending hours manually going through things, missing alt text, improper semantic HTML, things that, poor color contrast, things that, you know, are pretty easy to handle from a AI perspective, they can find them in seconds. So what would take a human, you know, a lot longer. So this is a great plus of AI for sure. But not only that, it's very consistent. So again, when I worked at different agencies working on compliance and reviewing products, I might be on their product for one feature, but then another colleague would be on the feature next, or the next week it could be a different person. So even that variance between humans, there's a little bit of inconsistency that just happens, right? I'm not talking about the automated checks, I'm talking about like all those manual checks that it's did. So it helps, AI takes over some of those repetitive tasks and really helps those teams focus on the more complex issues in accessibility. I think another thing that people don't maybe know about this, about AI and accessibility, is that it can spot patterns. So it can go beyond just detecting your issues. Because it's looking at that whole code base, it's starting to form opinions and see things that maybe other people don't see because it analyzes that large data set. It also learns from past projects and user interactions. It can spot problems that may be overlooked. For instance, like maybe the poor color contrast is frequently flagged on a specific feature or design element, and it can suggest alternative palettes. You choose one of those palettes, and then going forward, it assumes that baseline, right? So it's pretty cool. I want to show in here, okay, so this is my demo. This is a couple demos here, and I pre-recorded it. So I wouldn't have tech gremlins like I did yesterday, so I learned tech gremlins hate me. All right. So first I asked ChatGPT to write me some inaccessible HTML code, which wasn't a hard thing for it to do. And it gave me 7 issues. So it gave me lack of proper semantic HTML, a poorly described image, color contrast, missing ARIA, some hidden content, form label, and some keyboard issues. So then I took what ChatGPT gave me, and in this demo you're gonna see it in GitHub Copilot, and I asked it to review it. So first I did a linter. I know there's DQ representation in the house, and if you have a chance to go to that lunch, please do. Dylan is amazing. And I just want to preface that because I'm going to say the linter is different than the AI tool. So think of the linter as more of an automated tool because it is Xcore linter that I'm going to be showing first. And then ChatGPT, or sorry, not ChatGPT, but GitHub Copilot is more of like a manual tool because that's the AI guided. So you'll see what did Xcore accessibility linter pick up versus Copilot. Tech gremlins. Let's see. Yay. All right, there's no audio on this. It's just me kind of talking over it. So here's my code. I pop it in here to the VS Code again. I'm running my linter here, my Xcore linter. And you can see in here, it has no problems detected. I know there's at least 7, right? Because the ChatGPT made it. inaccessible. So here I type slowly because I can't spell, but I'm asking it, can you test this particular file, this AI tool? I'm like, hey, can you look at this and let me know what is wrong with it from an accessibility point of view? I'm still typing. And it thinks, and it comes up with some great solutions. It gives me some output. It actually tells me how to fix some of my accessibility JavaScript code that I was using for the linter also. That was very handy. But what it found basically is it found 5 of the 7 issues that we identified in ChatGPT, so 71%. Our linter caught 0, this caught 71. So it caught the button with the inline handler issue. We caught the color contrast. It caught the image alt text, form labels, and hidden content. What it was missing was the proper semantic HTML and then the missing ARIA roles. And it's not fair maybe to say that I missed those because I didn't really preface it. I didn't give it a very good prompt. I just said, hey, out of the box, like, what did you find? So that was for finding issues, but of course it can also help write accessible code. So some of those automated fixes, again, like going back to that palette example earlier, if I've already identified, like, this is the solution I want going forward, it can automatically apply that. We had some conversations, I think, at dinner about image, descriptions for images, and those are hilarious. Hilarious and sad at the same time. You know, you can see a bowl of noodles and a golden doodle, and it's like, it gets confused, like, is this a bowl of noodles, or is this actually a dog? So it's not 100% reliable, but it could at least make you laugh a few times how wrong it gets. Still in its infancy, I wouldn't say I would rely on that. But it's also really good at that workflow support. So we're bringing AI into the development process and prioritizing accessibility right away. Like I talked to the group yesterday, and the way GitHub uses it is we kind of do a twofold. We have an automated accessibility compliance, checkpoint for our teams and our products, and then we have a more manual one. So it is Axe-Core linter, I believe, on some other kind of CI/CD, ACDC workflow here. So I always get that one wrong. I got it wrong yesterday. But it helps a lot with accessibility debt. So not only is it doing those kind of continuous improvements across the board, right? You put in your code, you put in your PR, it tells you right away what is wrong, but it also helps you with your accessibility debt. So it doesn't accumulate. Like once it fixes it, it kind of learns to always fix that. One big piece that I love too, that we don't ever talk about either is the skill development. So AI offers that real-time solution. So inline, of course, but the AI can go beyond that. It serves as a mentor, flags issues, especially for people who are newer to accessibility. And that feedback loop really helps with understanding and encourages them to build more coding habits that are more inclusive, right? I was actually working with a developer not long ago who's new, and she saw the AI highlighting issues. Like, we were using the Copilot chat, and she saw it, and she said, okay, this is not only a valuable tool, this is also a valuable teaching resource. And so she was really excited about asking it questions. So, all right. So in this demo, I did the same thing as before with ChatGPT, only I said, hey, you made that inaccessible. Can you make it more inaccessible? And it said, no, sure, no problem, I can do this. So it gave me, instead of 7, I then had 13. So it had a new blinking element, verbose content, empty role button. Instead of just an image with a non-descriptive text, I also now have 2 images, and this one has missing alt text. And we have a non-functional link and some issues with a pattern, a drop-down pattern. And the same thing. I put it into, we'll play. I put it into my VS Code, and I'm going to run the accessibility linter and see if it can catch more issues this time than 0. And again, this is apples to oranges. It's not a fair comparison, but I just wanted to show, when we talk about automated checks and how much they catch, there's also how much it doesn't catch, right? In this particular case, it caught 3 issues, which is great. So 3 out of, 13, so about 23%. So it found the image alt issue, it found the label issue, and the select name issue. And if you haven't worked with this particular product before, it's very useful. I'm highlighting over it, and then there's a pop-up above it, and it gives me a lot of links and resources. Again, you can justify why you need to make those modifications. I send you to pages that also explain like the impact of users and things like that. So it's pretty cool. Then I'm asking ChatGPT, like again, or not ChatGPT, GitHub Copilot, and I said, hey, can you look at these for accessibility issues as well? So it finds more. So it got 11 out of 13, so 85% was caught in this particular case. So, I mean, pretty impressive. I mean, we've got some high numbers here. The things that it missed were the verbose paragraph, and we talked about that yesterday too, like that's not necessarily a fail, but that is a best practice, and that is something that we added in there to be bad. It also couldn't find the lack of semantic structure like it couldn't find before. So I think that it's still thinking. And of course, every time it gives me helpful examples, code snippets, and references at times when I need it. Oh, and this is where I'm showing it actually. You can kind of copy over. I asked, okay, you found all these issues, now make the whole file correct. And then that way I can just paste it over because I'm lazy and I didn't want to do it. And then I ran my linter again just to make sure that I caught those 3 that it identified earlier. And it did. It fixed it. So yay, AI. But of course, there are limitations to all of AI. So the first one is that limited detection. So it's super powerful, of course, and it can find a lot of those straightforward issues, but we saw the ones that are a little bit more complex and nuanced, particularly needing like user context involved. Those go unnoticed often. So recognizing this limitation makes people, want to do additional user kinds of tests. The other thing, there's one more demo where we will see this actually happen, and I didn't plan for it, like I was hoping it would be perfect, but it was kind of cool to see it too, because you can see it too. But this concepts around hallucinations, right? So your output could be not credible, it could be incomplete, not fully, misleading, right? But also this concept around hallucinations where it just makes stuff up. And I gave the example yesterday of I asked AI once to reorder a list of references for me because it's hundreds of references long. And not only did it not, it wasn't capable of doing it, it introduced references that didn't exist in my original list, and it created ones that didn't exist in the world, like people that didn't exist, topics that didn't exist, papers and links that didn't exist. So you really have to be careful with that output. And of course, it also has, Brad was mentioning too, you can't over-rely on any kind of tool. And in this particular case, there's a lot of dependency that happens around accessibility and AI or AI in general for anything that you're doing. You need to balance that AI with that human insight and then making products that are more accessible from all those angles. So 3 ways to boost AI accessibility, and this is one where, again, originally I wasn't giving AI a lot of information. If I gave it more information, would it be more accurate? And the short answer is, I think so, maybe, we hope. But effective prompts are key to helping AI, especially with accessibility. So if you are meeting certain standards or wanting to meet certain standards like WCAG 2.1 or 2.2 AA, you can specifically tell the AI that's what your standards are. If you have internal standards, you'd include those. If you've got other references like Mozilla and other, even going to design systems, like going back to the UK Gov one, that's a really great design system for accessibility. US has a good one as well, and maybe that's a good reference point. W3C also has their own pattern library as well, so it could be anything, right? You could just make sure that you include it in that prompt. The other thing was that code reviews. We just want to make sure that, again, that output is correct. And you kind of just want to double check it, just like you would consider like a junior dev or somebody new to your team. You wouldn't just like, hey, here's your code base, here's the code base, just have at it. You want to have a little bit of oversight, at least at first, before you understand that you trust it, right? And then, of course, refining, iterating. Think of it as an experiment, right? This is not going to be a plug and chug, and at least not now. Like, I think the dream of every accessibility professional, and all of us probably in the room who hate talking about or thinking about accessibility, because it can be a lot sometimes, is to just press that button and make it automated. And maybe that is our future, but we're not quite there yet. Okay, so this is the one where I asked it, I added okay, this is my engineering prompt. I'll have a link to where you can read more about this one. But basically, it's like what I said before. I'm asking it to look at these particular references to base its answer based on these particular things. And so I'm saying, hey, can you take that into mind? It's like, sure. And so it identifies 5 issues. So it identified 5 more issues than it did in the last time. So more than we even thought that it needed to have. So hidden content, link purpose, button accessibility, form labels, invisible overlay. Which all looks great. And then it gives me some additional learning resources because I mentioned those things that I wanted it to reference. And I said, can you export the whole file? All right, it's giving me the whole file. And then I'm going to send it over like I did before. So I have additional changes than I did before. So this is like the 3rd round of changes, but the 2nd for that 2nd file. And then I said, highlight the changes. And then it tells me which ones that were highlighted here, or which ones that it found. Those are the ones I just mentioned just a minute ago. I'm going slow on this because I didn't want you to go too fast here. But I already said all these things. And then I ask it, is there anything else you can do for accessibility? Is there any additional issues? And this is where that kind of that hallucination comes into play. Or you could even just say it's bad output. It's maybe not a full hallucination. And it said, sure, yeah, these are some things that you should do. You should close out your form, and then you should add some JavaScript for your focus management. And I look at my form code, and then I look at my what it told me to fix, and I notice, like, that looks exactly the same as what I already have. Okay, like, am I missing something? And so I tell it, or ask it, like, well, eventually I type in there, I say, my code, it looks like the suggestion that you gave me for the code, for the form code to close it out was already closed. It looks exactly the same. Eventually I write that. Let's see. Oh, it did recommend some great testing tools, which I love. We have Wave, we have Axe, we have Lighthouse, we have NVDA, and VoiceOver. So that was pretty handy of it. And I say, it doesn't look like you changed anything in the code. Again, I'm typing slow. I type faster, I swear. And it says, oh yeah, you're right. Thanks for pointing that out. Actually, you should do this instead. And then you look at it, and all it did was add an ARIA label to the form element to submit the form. So pretty much it added ARIA, and people who were in the workshop yesterday know, like, you just don't want to add ARIA willy-nilly. So in this particular case, it just added it for no good reason. And I'm like, so not only did it hallucinate and just say, like, oh yeah, this is code you should write. And I'm like, oh, I already wrote this code. It was like, oh, okay, you're right. Thanks for pointing that out. All right, I'm gonna add some ARIA. Now it's more accessible. I'm like, no, that's not how you do that. But anyway, so I found that really kind of fun. And I've had other examples with AI as well. That's just kind of the one I caught on a demo. So it's not perfect, right? If I hadn't have looked at that and I hadn't known, like, what to look for, I might have missed that completely. And I think that's the really interesting thing with accessibility too, is that when you mess up your code, we were just talking about this yesterday too with my friend April, is like if I mess up my JavaScript code, or I've been learning like C# and doing some Python things, like once I put in that code that AI has given me, I know right away if it doesn't work. It busts, like the functionality is gone. But when I do that for accessibility, I don't have any visual like way to know that it succeeded or not. I just assume it's right when it may actually be way worse than before. So you really have to make sure, until we figure out a way to kind of build those checks into the process, into an AI, we're just gonna have to keep testing, unfortunately. All right, if you wanna learn more about AI prompt engineering, you can scan this. So you can take that prompt if you want and then like modify it a little bit. This was written by Jesse Dugas and Ed Summers, who are my colleagues over at GitHub, and they have some really foundational information in what I used in the demo. And then just kind of wrapping up, integrating that AI development offers other benefits, early detection, automated fixes, all those great things. But as Sherry Byrne-Haber says, accessibility really isn't a problem to be fixed, it's a culture to be built. So building that culture recognizes that tools like AI are tools. They can help with efficiency, they can help give you valuable insights, but they're just tools, right? It shouldn't replace human interaction, it shouldn't replace user studies. But by combining those AI efficiency and that human insight, we can really build a more inclusive culture, and we can create digital products that just aren't compliant, but are also accessible. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carrie. Would you like to join me for a conversation? Well, fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been, well, incredible to see so many questions coming in. I think just because it's kind of accessibility on its own is a topic that I think still to many companies feels, oh, well, should we really? Okay, we have to, okay. So
yeah,
we will.
Yeah.
This still feels like that. So there are many questions around that too. One of them is, oh, I think I lost it. It was right here, just a second. Oh yeah, here we go. The one that came up was, so if we just plug in things like, accessibility overlays, does it solve mostly accessibility issues, or should we not use them at all? And do they even play nice with AI?
That's a really great question. We talked about that a little bit yesterday too, and we found that the last year over 900 companies who are using these AI overlays. So an AI overlay would be, if you've ever been to a website and you see that little usually it's like a wheelchair or like a little accessibility human with their arms out. I don't know why their arms are always out. But if you press it, a piece of JavaScript basically comes on top of it, and you can modify things like font colors and size and shapes and a couple other things, but fundamentally it doesn't affect the structure underneath. So if you have an assistive tech that is relying on that structure, like a screen reader, it wouldn't modify that. So it actually makes it worse for people with certain disabilities and certain AI or AT tools. But like anything, if you're using that, and I did talk to somebody after the workshop who was using that, and they said, oh, is this okay? Like, of course it's okay, but you also have to be working on it underneath. Like you can put it on there because you have some limitations, you want to help your users, but you're also in the back, like actually fixing the issues that you've already identified.
Right.
So I don't know if that answered the full question, but yeah. So it is, you're almost more liable, you're more likely to get sued now these days to have it versus not having it.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I'm coming from the GDPR land. You're welcome. Within the European Union, there has been a big announcement, which actually was making waves. I'm not sure if anybody aware or not. Because the European Commission has explicitly declared that the use of accessibility overlays does not make or guarantee compliance, and it must be documented that it will be used together with a manual accessibility testing. Mm-hmm. This must be documented. It's kind of, if you just plug in accessibility overlay from the European Commission's perspective, I mean, we're very good at regulation. you can see that this is
True.
just not compliant. So again, with the European Accessibility Act, and this is kind of another question that comes
Well,
up.
and I think the issue, so Carl Groves, he's a person in an accessibility field, and he's got a fact sheet, overlay fact sheet
Yep.
that you can
Yeah, yeah.
Google, and I've signed it, and a lot of professionals have to say, this is not a good practice for X, Y, and Z, but you have all these people who are talking about the experience with it. But I think the sad part about overlays is, like I was saying to the group yesterday too, is that I personally have a friend who has a business, a small business, and he got hit with a drive-by lawsuit. It wasn't legitimate. They were just it was a money grab. And he's like, oh, I'm gonna put that accessibility overlay and that should fix everything. Like he thought it was gonna be helpful. Like, so I think it's almost like, it's like snake oil. Like if you know that phrase where it's like, I'm selling you something that's not gonna work and you're gonna take it thinking it's gonna work. And it's kind of like taking advantage of somebody and their money, and it's just kind of, it's sad all the way around because it hurts the users, and businesses have to pay and they're more liable, and it's not doing what they thought it was going to do.
I'm wondering, actually, there's just a question for the audience. Has it become easier for you to make a strong case for accessibility these days? Please raise your hand if you feel like it. Okay, well, that seems like something has shifting, or is changing indeed. It's always a bit of a story, because I think, again, the question, I guess, trying to kind of bring up here is, sometimes there is a commitment to do accessibility, but then the minimum of it, just to be compliant and to avoid the lawsuits and everything. So how do you do that extra step to actually establish sort of accessibility research or accessibility testing, or kind of get the routine of bringing maybe a few people with disabilities every now and again, a couple of months or so, to run this test? I think like, this is still not something that companies just opt in right away. It still feels, at least to me, and please feel free to disagree, of course, that we're just covering the minimum, but then if it's compliant, doesn't mean that the accessible experience is usable. Yeah. Right? So how do you do that? Okay.
How much time do we have? No, I think that's kind of what we talked about a lot yesterday too, where it was like, it's complicated, right? And I think people have good intentions and businesses have good intentions, but we have competing priorities. We only have so many resources to go around. I'm lucky where I am to have a whole team, and we have researchers, and we have an inclusive panel, so we have built up some people with lived experience to come in and test things for us and give us feedback. And so we've got some of those feedback loops in there, plus the AI, like you can really tap into that, and that could be part of that loop. So AI could cover some of those like low bar effort things like we saw, because you can integrate it into your workflow. And then you don't have to think about those, and it frees you up for more opportunities to talk to users, or to build a training program, or to do your own research. But that's the thing, like at the end of the day, there's no such thing, like even like when we saw Brad and those universal patterns, like for accessibility, it's not a reality, because it's so contextual, it's so complex, it's really, for me, it's all about like what I talked about last in Smashing was like giving users choices. So having more and more choices given to our user, they can decide what they want. Because on any particular day, like you wake up in the morning and like your screen is super bright and you're like, I need my coffee. And you're like, dark mode. You don't want to see the white mode or light mode. And so you're just like, that was a choice. But later in the day, you may feel differently. You're like, okay, I'm tired. I need it to be a little brighter. My eyes are tired. And so any given time, I can make a different choice because I've got that control. I'm just not locked into one thing.
Makes sense, yeah.
So,
I think also like one thing that I see in Europe now, again, just this is kind of my perspective, is that very often when the term accessibility comes up, it feels like it's a very technical concern.
It's heavy.
It feels like heavy, it's costly, it's difficult, it's not easy to manage. No. This is kind of what is often related to that. And so for me personally, what really has helped is to kind of speak about inclusive design instead, like all the way. I almost never mention the word accessibility anymore, although of course it's a different thing. And also like this little thing, because Eric Bailey wrote this wonderful post, I think, a couple of weeks ago. So he was speaking about people don't understand that they actually often rely on accessibility, like almost every day. We often think about it being something that doesn't affect us, but then when you think about glasses, let's say, that you're using and relying on.
That's an AT.
Yeah, or subtitles, right, or things like that. This is accessible features.
Your keyboard is an accessibility feature.
So that kind of really helps. And
that's the thing too, we talked about too, like motivating factors and figuring out what it is, like your boss or your team or your colleague, what do they need? And that's why I kind of pointed out those three, like users and litigation, laws, but also that business case, because especially at the leadership level, they seem to, they're like, oh, this is like an untapped market. Like if someone could tell you, I can give you access to a team or a group of people who have like $1.2 trillion sitting in their back pocket ready to spend. You're like, oh yeah, hell yeah, where's that?
Absolutely.
Give me the people, give me the money,
Mm-hmm.
So you just have to know who you're talking to, your audience, and there's different ways.
Absolutely. Maybe then the last question, then we wrap
Sure.
up. If you also have more questions, by the way, dear friends, you can also join the lounge that we have next to the TV box outside. So this is where we always invite speakers to come in, so you can ask questions directly there if you want to. David is wondering, in the future, can we hope for AI to fully automate accessibility testing? Or do you think that human testers will always be necessary?
I think they'll always be necessary, but I will say though, so when I started my career, automated checkers only caught like 30%. Now we're kind of roughly the people, automated tool people tell us it's like 53%. But I have colleagues who started and there were no tools at all. So my thought is like we're gonna get closer and closer, but there'll always be that percentage of like user-focused choice that we're gonna have to give. So maybe you could get it to 90%. And trust me, all accessibility professionals would love to be out of that job and like do something else, because it's a lot. It's a lot what we do, because yeah, I mean, it's heavy, it's complicated. You're not always the most popular person in the room, for sure. But we care, and that's why we keep doing it. So
Exactly,
I think a one piece like to leave with too is just like give yourself a break, right? I look back at some of the mistakes that I made as a junior developer, and I made some really inaccessible stuff. And I look back and I'm like cringe, but it also made me grow as a person, because I started asking questions like, how are people consuming my code? What is their relationship with this, functionality? Like, and I started to think about it from that user perspective, and I was like, oh yeah, this has to change, And like for me personally, it was like a motivating factor. But again, I have to forgive my older self, younger self, and older self probably too. But like, and taking that time to look back and like look at the journey, or look down the mountain and say, look how far we've come.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually quite hopeful that maybe 2-3 years from now will be, even more people will say that it's probably has been or become even easier to make a strong case. So I'm very hopeful for that. All right, well, thank you so much for being with us, Carrie.
Thank you.
Thank you.